Hello and welcome to Hollywood. We are here on the Warner Brothers lot to bring you an Oscar special. This, of course, is home to many classic movies over the years, and it's where many of the scenes were shot for the film that everyone's talking about at the moment, La La Land.
It's pretty strange that we keep running into each other.
Maybe it means something.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, the Academy, of course, was always going to love a film about Hollywood, but how does this film compare then to the Golden Age classics? I thought I'd look into the work that went into making La La Land. Attempting to recreate the magic of the Hollywood musical was pretty brave. Could it ever live up to the Golden Age? Its stars certainly put the legwork in, a 3-month boot camp to master dancing, singing, and for Ryan Gosling, learning to play the jazz piano.
The director, Damien Chazelle, wanted to shoot the dance sequences, some of the songs, and some of these piano pieces all in one shot. So there was no opportunity to kind of cut in a proper piano player. So unless I wanted to shatter his dreams, I had to sit down and apply myself.
City of stars, are you shining just for me?
But not everyone's convinced. These musical theatre students were rather underwhelmed.
I don't think they're particularly challenging songs. I think because they were written for actors rather than for musical theatre performers, they made them simpler.
I think it might be remembered just possibly for the awards that it's won, but as a musical, it wouldn't be up there with the great ones, definitely not.
If you keep your fingers on the same notes...
As for learning the jazz piano...
The music has been written in a way that actually makes it reasonably straightforward to learn. So, for example, if you put your hand in a particular place on the keyboard, you can actually play the whole phrase without moving your hand once. And those are the tricks that a good writer will be able to use.
Ryan had 3 months. I thought I'd give it a go in 3 weeks.
If you have a better keyboard, I'm sure that we could get you doing 2 hands, but this is probably unlikely.
If La La Land had taught me anything, it was to dream big. Hollywood was calling. Of course, in Tinseltown, everyone just breaks into dance. It's a recognisable routine for musical aficionados. So can La La Land really compete with Fred Astaire's finesse? And could I compete with Ryan?
Today, we have Katie from London, who has played piano for only 3 weeks, and she's here for the Oscars along with her film crew, and she's going to do a special song for you, and it's an Oscar-winning song. Go get it, Katie.
OK, Ryan, maybe it's a little harder than it looks. Well, joining me now is entertainment reporter Amy Nicholson. Now, Amy, the excitement over La La Land began very early on with this film, didn't it? Why has it made such an impact?
I think with La La Land, what you're seeing is a film that looked unlike anything else that we usually think of when we think of what a Best Picture is. We think of a film that's serious, has historical impact, it's a drama, it has a true life angle to it. La La Land is a light, bright musical starring 2 of the biggest movie stars of their generation. You have Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, actors that people love, and then combining them in something that's colorful and a musical and feels fresh again, I think got it a lot of attention right when it started playing festivals.
The fact that we have been talking about this film now for months and months, do you think to an extent perhaps that could damage its chances on Sunday? We're a bit fatigued with talking about La La Land.
What we've seen happen in the last few months in America is kind of a tonal shift where we're wondering, do we want to see a bright comedy like La La Land reflect us, something dreamy that says that this is what America is all about? Or are voters maybe getting ready to honor something that feels more like what America is today, something more serious like Moonlight? And I think we're starting to see that conversation shift back a little in Moonlight's favor.
And if we take La La Land really for what it is then, a musical, how do you think when we look back on this time, in a few years' time, it'll compare to some of the greats that we've had?
Well, it's interesting because, as you know, La La Land set an Academy record, along with All About Eve and Titanic. These films have 14 nominations each. They're tied for the most number of nominations of all time. That's All About Eve and that's Titanic. I mean, these are two huge movies in the history of classic cinema. I love Titanic. I don't know how you feel. And I can't help but think that La La Land doesn't quite measure up to that level. It's a cute film and it's a charming film, and I think it's won a lot of people's hearts this year. But I don't think it's going to last in the same way that those other films have. But yet the history books might make it seem just as important.
Well, of course, there are a lot of other films that are nominated this Sunday, and Robbie Collin, our film critic, has been talking me through some of the nominees.
It's like a pipe dream.
This is the dream. It's conflict and it's compromise. It's very, very exciting.
It is the film that everyone's been talking about, isn't it? La La Land now goes down into the Oscar history books, if you like, as well, for nominations.
Yes, the most nominations ever, tied with Titanic and All About Eve.
And it just immediately struck everyone as a worthy Best Picture winner. First of all, it's Hollywood kind of celebrating itself. It's looking back to old styles of filmmaking, the golden age of the MGM musical. It's also updating that, and it's moving it on and saying these are techniques and styles of entertainment that are still completely relevant and moving and exciting and funny in the modern world.
Is anything else going to sort of come close?
You've got La La Land, you've got Manchester by the Sea, and then also Moonlight, which was this kind of art house festival circuit runaway success about a young guy who's black and gay growing up in Miami.
At some point, you got to decide for yourself who you're going to be. Can't let nobody make that decision for you.
It's very delicate and beautifully composed. I think it leads to an Oscar race this year that is in many ways incredibly diverse.
That was a big thing last year, wasn't it? The Oscars so white debate. It's a very different field this year, though, that we're seeing, much more diverse.
I mean, for the last 2 years, all of the acting nominees were white. And this year, there are 6 non-white contenders across the 4 categories. So I think the efforts that the Academy has been going to make sure the diversity of its membership matches up with the diversity of cinema itself, or at least begins to reflect it. The fruit of that is now being seen in the people in the films that are being nominated.
Talk us through the British nominees then, who we've seen this year.
Andrew Garfield and Naomi Harris has been nominated for Moonlight. I'm probably most excited about Dev Patel being nominated in Best Supporting Actor for Lion. He has real leading man charm in this, and you sense this is a real step up career-wise for him.
It's certainly going to be a very interesting ceremony. Thank you so much, Robbie Collin, for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, Amy Nicholson is still with me. Amy, come on then, out of this year's nominees, what do you want to see win Best Picture?
Out of these 9, I think I'd like to see it go to Moonlight. We haven't had a Best Picture like Moonlight ever. I mean, this is a film that talks about a character we don't get to see on film, a young black gay man living in Florida. And it's also a film that tells a story in a totally different way by using 3 different actors to play this character throughout his life. If we honor that, we're honoring something that I think is brand new and fresh and really represents what was happening right now in Hollywood.
I have to say, personally, my favourite has to be Lion, and Dev Patel, Britain's own, is up for Best Supporting Actor, and I had the very good fortune of catching up with him just a few weeks ago to chat about that role.
Let's start with where you're from.
Calcutta. Which part? I'm adopted, I'm not really Indian.
Deeply emotional, incredibly cinematic. Lion has put Dev Patel firmly back on Hollywood's radar, with a role that's captivated critics.
It's kind of a journey that any young actor would die to go on, you know, and for me, being a British Asian, it poses a real departure from the usual roles that I get given or I'm up for. It has a real weight to the journey.
I have to find my way back home.
It's based on an extraordinary true story. As a 5-year-old in India, Saru Brearley wanders alone onto a train, losing his family. He's eventually adopted by an Australian couple, but never loses the niggling guilt that his mum and brother might still be looking for him.
He was suppressing a part of his Indian roots, his culture, so he could fit in Australia. And that's something that I did growing up here in London, you know, when I went to school. And it was only when I went to shoot Slumdog that I really experienced this country and could really appreciate it.
Welcome to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Dev was just 17 when he made the movie that introduced him to the world. In 2009, Slumdog won 8 Oscars. But after the award ceremonies were over, he struggled to find work and was criticised for taking on some questionable roles.
You don't want to be attacked for playing who you are sometimes. Like, I'm a British Asian, so, you know, when the dialogue is like, oh, he's just playing an Indian guy, you're like, wait a minute, you wouldn't crucify De Niro for playing an Italian, would you? So why is that seen as a hindrance?
Now 26, Dev Patel is older and wiser. The journey to making Lion has taught him a lot.
If it was all success, I may be a very different person. It's very humbling when you come off such a big experience and then face a big failure or something, but it makes you also appreciate when stories like this come around, and that's why I ended up knocking on the screenwriter's door, because I wanted it so bad.
Coming up, we look at how the Academy has responded to last year's race row and whether or not the ceremony itself could be hijacked by a certain politician. Hello and welcome back to Hollywood. We're on the set of La La Land for an Oscars special, and aside from the films this year, our West Coast correspondent Greg Milam has been looking at the fact that this year's ceremony looks set to be particularly politically charged.
Donald Trump's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame was taped over this week, security say to protect it from red carpet damage. But just along from the Oscars venue, it's also perhaps a metaphor for what Hollywood thinks of the new president. What started with Meryl Streep's condemnation at the Golden Globes will reach Hollywood's biggest stage. And whoever protests will have the backing of the president of the Academy.
One thing that we're all happy about is that we have freedom of speech. It makes it very human, I think, right? Because it's at the moment and no one knows what name is going to be read off the envelope. So it's pretty spontaneous. And I think and I hope that those on stage will give us a 45 seconds of something really meaningful and touching.
But there are nominees who won't be protesting if they win.
Unfortunately, celebrity culture has gotten to the point where a celebrity's voice is more meaningful than other people's in certain ways, and that's a shame. That shouldn't be the case. For me, from my perspective, I'm not a big fan of that as a cultural state that we're in.
The watching millions have seen political protest at the Oscars before.
In 1973, it was the first time anyone had gotten political about the Oscars, and Marlon Brando had won the Best Actor award for The Godfather, and he boycotted the awards and sent Sachin Littlefeather to speak out against the way Native Americans were portrayed by Hollywood in films and television. This is Michael Moore. He took the opportunity to criticize George W. Bush for the Iraq War, but got booed off the stage, really. So Leonardo DiCaprio had just won his first Oscar. It was for The Revenant, for Best Actor. He emphasized climate change is real and it affects the indigenous people and everyone. These folks have given us countless hours of entertainment. For us to give them 30 seconds to speak on an important issue, I think, is a fair trade.
Donald Trump wasn't always so unpopular here. They did, after all, give him that star for his work on The Apprentice. And remember, this is a man who once said his first ambition in life was to be a Hollywood movie mogul. There's no doubt we will hear plenty about him at the Oscars. He hasn't taken kindly to Hollywood's criticisms so far. You might want to find something else to watch this weekend.
Well, Greg joins me now. Greg, then, do we think President Trump is going to be back on Twitter then this Sunday when he watches the ceremony itself?
I think we're pretty certain that he will be. It may well be that we see real-time tweeting from the Oval Office on the Oscars for the first time in history, because we saw before how offended he was by what Meryl Streep said at the Golden Globes and calling her overrated. He couldn't help but respond to criticism, which is something symptomatic of Donald Trump, the president. So I think, there's so much at stake. There's so much discussion about him and what he means to the United States. I think it's impossible to believe that he won't come up during the ceremony, and impossible to believe that he won't respond if he does, because we've seen in the past he's rather thin-skinned about these things.
There is a certain irony, isn't there, to him being at loggerheads with Hollywood, because this is a world that he loves. I mean, over the years he's had bit parts in films, hasn't he? Of course, he was the star of The Apprentice. He loves this world at the same time as sort of being up against it.
Yeah, and remember, he said that his first ambition wasn't to go into real estate like his father. His first ambition was to become a Hollywood movie mogul, to come to this place, sets like this, and make movies and become a big deal in Hollywood, and it didn't happen. Things turned out rather differently for anyone. But yeah, he is someone who understands the entertainment industry. He understands how to make a success out of being in the entertainment industry, and I think understands what's going on with the industry and their view of him, and I think that hurts him, because this is a place that he wants to be accepted, and the thought that he's not is very difficult for him.
Who are these sort of pampered, privileged Hollywood types to be speaking out? Does it actually affect them? Do they have a legitimate reason to be speaking out, do you think?
It depends who you ask. Some think they've got a responsibility to do it, that these are issues that affect them just as they affect everyday Americans and people around the world. But there are those, like Andrew Garfield, who'll say that celebrities have been elevated to a position of having this role and this greater say, and that's not right. And it's impossible to think that people won't mention Donald Trump on the stage from the host down, and it's impossible to think he won't respond, because history tells us that he generally does.
And it's not just politics on the agenda. This time last year, the Oscars so white debate controversy really just exploded. This year, however, though, it's a very different picture.
We may lose the small battles, but win the big war.
And who is you?
Nobody.
I told him if he wasn't a mankind, and move out the way so the mankind could find me.
Looking at this year's standout hopefuls, you could almost forget last year's Oscars so white race row, sparked by 2 years of entirely white acting nominees. This year, however, there are nods for 7 non-white actors.
Here in Hollywood, the Academy was forced to introduce 683 new members in an effort to diversify, and it seems to have had an effect.
Moonlight, the moving story of a gay black boy from Miami, is up for 8 Oscars this weekend. It's a film that in the past might have been overlooked.
I think people have sought out the film, you know, as a very, I think, honest depiction of a certain version of the American life that is just as valid as other versions, other depictions of American life. The only difference is this version, you know, isn't given voice very often.
What happened, Chiron? Why you didn't come home like you're supposed to?
Naomi Harris was hesitant about playing a crack addict mum, reluctant to play stereotypes.
I'd always said that I wanted to use my career to portray positive images of women, because I felt that, you know, my mother is an incredibly inspirational figure in my life, and I felt I grew up in a community of very strong, intelligent, capable women, but I didn't see them reflected on screen.
Students at this drama school in London couldn't be more pleased with this year's nominees.
Dev Patel, fellow Asian, up there representing us. I think they're amazing actors, very inspiring, especially Denzel Washington.
But are the parts really there for these young actors?
There are a lot of casting directors there that really fight the cause of diversifying all the programmes that they work on. It's really to do with the people above that, the producers, the ones that don't have as much faith and belief that if they did cast a diverse cast, that it won't lose them any sort of, you know, revenue on the back end.
I plan on being an engineer at NASA.
And nobody dares stand in the way.
Hidden Figures is breaking those barriers, up for 3 Oscars. It knocked Rogue One off of the top spot in America, taking $60 million in 10 days.
You go from a year where there's no participation to this wondrous diversity that really it reflects not only a healthier industry, but it reflects an artistry that is not as limited. You know, it's not this tightly focused as it was.
This year's Oscar nominations may be the first baby steps, but Hollywood itself still has a long way to go.
How every day my real brother screams my name.
Well, there's some debate about whether or not Denzel Washington stands a chance of winning Best Actor for Fences this Sunday, but his co-star Viola Davis, everyone is tipping to win Best Supporting Actress, and Sky's Gillian Joseph went to meet her.
How come you ain't never liked me?
Like you?
It's the antithesis of Denzel Washington's action movies.
Based on a play by August Wilson, Fences is set almost entirely in this backyard. And yet, as well as awards recognition, it's been a top 10 box office hit in the States.
Straighten up, damn it.
He told the story of the average black man. He saw the value in that story. You know, Arthur Miller, said when he wrote Willie Loman that I know that these are not the finest men who ever lived, but a terrible thing has happened to them, so their stories deserve to be told.
It's not easy for me to admit that I've been standing in the same place for 18 years. Well, I've been standing with you.
Those are the stories that chronicle where we were as African Americans. It's those thousands, millions of the average black person who maybe wasn't educated, maybe didn't know how to read. My father didn't know how to read till he was 15. Those are the stories that let you know where we were. I'm glad August Wilson saw value in it.
A man is supposed to take care of his family.
And because the American playwright insisted on a black director, it took 30 years to bring this story to the big screen. But now, in the wake of Hollywood's race row, its timing somehow makes this film resonate more.
Let's talk about diversity. Huge row with the Oscars last year about diversity of actors in films and films nomination. Do you think that we've come over that now? Do you think that the Oscars are moving in the right direction and Hollywood's moving in the right direction?
It is moving in the right direction. It's directing. Because I think that people of color are refusing to put Hollywood in the driver's seat. They are being the instrument of change. But I always say my three biggest words with a question mark at the end. And now what? Oscars are going to be over February 26th. And now what? What kind of films are going to be produced? What are the storylines?
I go out of here every morning. I bust my butt.
But as one of 3 Oscar-nominated films with an entirely black cast, this simple story of an American dad in the 50s represents, at this time, so much more than perhaps even its playwright could have imagined. Gillian Joseph, Sky News.
That's all from us in Hollywood, and don't forget, Sky is the British home of the Oscars, and you can watch the ceremony exclusively live on Sky Cinema or Sky Living from 11:30 on Sunday night, and you can join me on Sky News live on Monday morning with all the winners at the Vanity Fair party. Bye-bye.